Somehow, the same kind of person keeps finding you. Different face, different story, same ending. And at some point you start asking, why does this keep happening to me? You've probably been told it's because you love too much. But that explanation never actually changed anything. Because narcissists don't choose you. They pick up on something. And what that is, most people never see. You know the feeling I'm talking about. I remember standing in my kitchen at 2 a.m., reading the same text message for the 14th time, trying to find the version of it that didn't hurt. Not because I was blind to what was happening. Something in me had already decided, before I even met them, this was the one I could finally reach. I didn't know yet. The pull I felt toward broken people wasn't empathy. It was something I'd learned, something I'd been carrying for a long time. You're maybe 3 weeks into something new. Things are intense in that way that feels like chemistry, but sits slightly wrong in your stomach. And there's this quiet alarm, this small, low voice somewhere in your chest that you immediately talk yourself out of. It's fine. They're just going through something. I can see what's underneath. The real them is in there. And the real them was in there. That's not the problem. The problem is what came after. The slow erosion. The moment you realized that the more you gave, the more was expected. The person you were trying to help didn't want to heal. It wanted to be fed. And here's the part that I think is the most painful. You saw it coming. On some level, you always do. But you went in anyway, because a part of you had already decided, this time will be different. You've asked yourself, why does this keep happening to me? If you've asked that, write pattern in the comment below, because that's where this starts. The standard answer to this is, everyone says it's because you're empathetic, and that's not wrong. But if that were the full answer, this would have stopped by now. After the boundaries, after the red flags, after you told yourself, never again. And yet, the same pattern keeps showing up, which means something else is driving this. So I started looking for something deeper, something most people never check. Not just bad relationships, the specific dynamic, same intensity at the start, same slow erosion in the middle, same confusion and self-blame at the end. And I wanted to know, is this random, or is there a pattern behind it? That's when I started looking at birth charts. And when you look at enough of them, certain things start repeating. Neptune kept showing up, that permeability, that dissolved emotional edge. But Neptune wasn't telling the whole story, because Neptune explains why you feel everything. It doesn't explain why you keep being drawn specifically toward the one wound you can never actually heal. And I kept finding something else sitting right alongside it in those charts. Something that most people don't associate with attraction at all. And when I understood what it was doing, everything I thought I knew about this dynamic shifted. It's called chiron. And I want to say something up front, because this is where most people misunderstand it. This isn't about one specific placement. It shows up differently in different charts, but when it's active, it creates something very specific in you, a kind of antenna, specifically tuned not to pain in general, but to pain that's hidden, buried under performance, under charm, under the version of someone they show the world. Sometimes it shows up in relationships, in love, in the way you bond with people, In some charts, that's Chiron in the 7th house, but that's just one expression. Because what you're actually looking at is a radar system that's been running since childhood. And here's my honest opinion on this. I think most empaths don't just notice wounded people. I think they are called toward them, with a pull that bypasses every rational thought. And here's the part that really changed how I see the narcissist in this story. They're not drawn to you because you're an easy target. They're not drawn to your kindness, but they're drawn to the wound you can see, the one they hide. And there is a part of them, buried under all the control, performance, and armor, that has been waiting their entire life for someone to finally see it. They believe somewhere deep in themselves that if they can just stay close enough to someone who understands suffering, something might finally stop hurting. It never works that way. The pull is real, and it's in the birth chart. If this is already reframing things you've spent years trying to make sense of, hit the like button. Because when you do, it helps this video reach other people who are still sitting there wondering why this keeps happening to them. Now here's the part almost no one talks about. This is the part that makes the childhood layer suddenly click. Because the wound isn't just attracting the wrong person, it's doing something after that. It's making you stay. That's the piece most people miss completely. The attraction and the staying, those are two different patterns, and they both live in your chart. Here's how it actually shows up in your body. You walk into a room, and in the way someone holds themselves, the way they perform ease just a little too perfectly, you sense it. You're sitting across from them, but part of you is scanning. There's something off, something empty underneath. Are they okay? Are you saying the right thing? You're not relaxed, you're managing, and your nervous system doesn't evaluate. It doesn't say, should I engage with this person? It just leans in. Not because you're naive, not because you're desperate, because your system learned this early, before you even had words for it. Neptune is the permeability. You absorb emotional atmospheres the way other people feel the temperature change when they walk into a room. But Chiron gives that permeability a direction. It points your sensitivity right at the wound you've been living with your whole life. And once you're in it, leaving doesn't feel right. It feels like you didn't do enough, like it was your job to fix it, and you didn't. That's not a character flaw, and that's the wound keeping you exactly where it wants you. Because here's what I've come to believe, and I hold this pretty firmly. This didn't start in a romantic relationship. It started in a house that you grew up in the specific emotional climate of your childhood. And what Chiron shows you is that this wasn't random. It's the same wound showing up in a different form. If you grew up around someone whose mood controlled the room, and you were always trying to keep it steady, your nervous system learned something. Read the wound. Become the solution. Not because anyone taught you, because you learned very young the safest way to be loved was to manage how someone else felt. You got good at it. That skill genuinely kept you safe. But now it's doing the same thing in your adult relationships. Finding the person in the room with the hidden wound, believing somewhere beneath the conscious thought that you might be the one who finally helps it heal. Not because you show up too much, because you learned what love looks like, to read need as intimacy, and being needed felt like love. I want to offer you a different way of seeing this. Because this dynamic is usually explained like a predator-prey story, one person feels everything, the other feels nothing. I get why people say that. It's simple. It gives you somewhere to put the blame, but it's not the whole picture. I don't think this is about good and bad. I think it's about two different ways of surviving the same thing. Picture two kids in the same house. Something in that house doesn't feel stable. The energy shifts. You don't always know what's coming next. They're both feeling it, but they learn very different ways to deal with it. One goes inward. I'll stay open. I'll feel everything. I'll be the one who keeps this safe. They become attentive, sensitive, always reading the room, not because they're weak, because someone had to stay connected. The other goes the opposite way. I'm not going to feel this. I'll stay in control. I'll make sure I'm never the one exposed again. They learn to manage how they're seen, to stay composed, to keep control. Not because they think they're better than anyone, but because feeling small, unseen, or out of control wasn't something they could afford. So instead of staying connected, they learn to step away from what they feel, and they don't even realize they're doing it. And over time, that starts to look like something else, needing to be seen a certain way, struggling to stay present with other people's emotions, pulling back right when things start to get real. Not because they don't care, because going there would take them back to something they learned wasn't safe. Same experience, two completely different ways of surviving it. That's why it feels familiar, even when it hurts. And this is the part almost no one sees. This dynamic isn't random. It's two people who learned opposite ways to deal with the same kind of pressure. And seeing that doesn't mean you stay in it. It just means you finally understand what you're in. Because once you can see the pattern, it stops feeling like connection. Understanding the pattern isn't the same as changing it. And this is where most people get stuck. Because when you're in that window and the pattern starts getting louder again, your mind already knows what's happening, but your body still moves the same way. So the question isn't, why do I do this? You already know why. The real question is, what do you do in the moment it's happening? The next time you feel that pull, that familiar, almost home feeling, don't analyze it right away. Just pause, even for a few seconds, and ask yourself, am I looking for love right now? Or am I trying to fix something? That's where the shift starts. Not by pushing it away, but by staying with yourself long enough to choose something different. Because real boundaries aren't walls. They're not about shutting people out. They're about staying connected to yourself, even when your system starts pulling you back toward what feels familiar. You've been carrying this pattern for a long time, and now you can see it. That's not small. That's the beginning. But seeing it isn't the same as knowing where you are in it. Because this pattern doesn't just end randomly. There are specific points in your life where it actually starts to loosen, where the pull changes, where the dynamic stops working the same way. And most people miss that moment because they don't recognize it for what it is. Some of you are already there, closer to the end of this than you think. But without context, it just feels confusing, or like nothing has changed yet. So if something in you is starting to recognize this, the next piece matters. The next video breaks that down. Empaths and narcissists. Your birth chart reveals when it ends. That's where you'll see where you actually are in the cycle and what starts shifting next. It's on screen now. I'll see you there.